Boom, ba boom, ba boom, ba boom, ba boom. Uh-oh. Now that you understand the basics of law and have a sense of where to find legal resources, you're ready to go, right? Well, almost. To maximize the effectiveness of your research, we suggest you first spend some time framing your research question or questions. And this chapter will help you do that by covering how to approach your research, locating the resources that will help you find what you need, and framing your legal questions. How to approach your research. Before beginning your research, you'll find it helpful to break down your project into small, manageable steps. We propose thinking about your legal research this way. Step 1. Is this a civil issue, a criminal issue, or both? Step 2. What area of the law should I focus on? Step 3. What are the resources that will help me solve my problem? Step 4. What do I need to do with the information I find? For purposes of explaining how to do your research and what to do with the results, we'll assume that you'll approach research this way. We think you'll find it makes most sense and will help you stay organized and focused. For example, let's say you're a landlord trying to determine whether you can evict a tenant who hasn't paid rent in over 3 months. You start by identifying the area of law that you're researching. Is it a civil issue? Meaning you're not trying to throw the tenant in jail, you're just trying to get him out of the apartment. And you know that that is an issue of landlord-tenant law. So it probably is an issue of state law because we explained in chapter 1, it is mostly exclusive state law that deals with landlord-tenant issues. You can focus your research on sources that cover landlord-tenant issues. Next, you can look to the resource that will help you solve your problem, including your state's primary law and secondary sources like a court-provided resources. Finally, you know what you can take the information you find and figure out what it means. That you should write a letter to the tenant, file an eviction suit, or pursue some other measure. The rest of this chapter gives you more information on how to answer the 4 steps mentioned above. Step 1. Is this a civil or criminal? Understand your issue. Understanding whether your issue is a matter of civil law or criminal law is the first broad step in narrowing your research. You might know the answer to this question very clearly. For example, if you or someone you know has been arrested, you know that your issue involves criminal law. Or if you're going to sue a creditor, then that is a civil matter. Below, we'll explain how you can tell the difference between civil and criminal cases when you aren't exactly sure. The issue of whether a matter is civil or criminal also has 2 subparts. You need to figure out whether the matter is substantive, or are you talking about asking about what the law is, or procedural? Is your question about the court process, or both? And whether it is an issue of state law, federal law, or both. We'll discuss those in further detail too. Criminal law. Generally, if a specific type of behavior is punishable by imprisonment, in jail or prison, criminal law is involved. Because crimes are considered offensive against people, charges are usually initiated in the court by a government prosecutor. If you are involved in a legal dispute with a non-governmental individual or corporation, then the matter is not criminal. If the government gets involved, it might be criminal. But the government is involved in many civil matters too. I got to do this. Hold on. Hold, please. Can't eat burgers, man. Gotta get me some breakfast. Give me something to eat. Eating breakfast for dinner. Okay, hold on. Next, got substantive criminal law. Two separate subcategories within criminal law will help you narrow your search. These are substantive law and criminal procedure. Substantive law is the rules themselves, the definitions and punishment of crimes. For example, substantive criminal laws tell us the difference between burglary, breaking and entering into the premises of another's with the intent to commit a theft or a felony, and larceny, taking properly, rightfully in possession of another with the intent to steal. It also specifies how each of these crimes is punished. Below is a list of common criminal substantive law categories you might research. Substantive criminal law to better understand what you or someone you know is being accused of doing. For example, and what the punishment is if found guilty. Criminal law substantive categories: assault and battery, breaking and entering, burglary, conspiracy, disorderly conduct, drugs and narcotics, drunken driving, juvenile offenses, kidnapping, larceny, looting, lascivious behavior, malicious mischief, marijuana cultivation, murder, rape, robbery, shoplifting, smuggling, tax evasion, trespass, and weapon offense. Criminal procedure. Criminal procedure is the process that the government must follow when bringing charge against someone. For example, criminal procedure involves such things as what kind of evidence can be used in a criminal trial, when an accused must be brought to trial, when a person can be released on bail, and so on. You might be researching criminal procedure because you think you or someone else is not being treated fairly by the criminal justice system. For example, if you were entitled to a hearing in a criminal case and did not receive it, it would be an issue of criminal procedure. Below is a list of common criminal procedure categories: arraignments, arrests, confessions, cross-examinations, extradition, grand jury indictments, jury selection, jury verdicts, Miranda warnings, plea bargains, pleas, preliminary hearings, probation reports, right to counsel, seizure, search and seizure, sentencing, speedy trial, suppression of evidence, trials and witnesses. In researching criminal law, it is common to have questions of both substance and procedure. For example, let's say your house was searched by the police without a warrant and an illegal drug was found inside. You might want to research whether police had the right to search your house and issue a procedure. You might also want to know whether the law requires the government to prove that the drug belongs to you, not your roommate. That is a matter of substantive law. Civil law: when you sue or are sued by someone else other than the district attorney. It is a matter of civil law. In a civil action, the court can't usually imprison anyone except in rare circumstances. For example, when a court orders a parent to pay child support and that parent willfully refuses, and that's not what the person is bringing a lawsuit the plaintiff is looking for. Instead, they are hoping the court will compensate them for their damages, the loss caused by the plaintiff's alleged action or order the defendant to do something. When a plaintiff asks for damages, they're asking for money. Asking the court to order the defendant to do or not do something can involve, for example, prohibiting an ex-employee from using company trade secrets or requiring a person to honor a previous agreement. Whether you're involved in a dispute with the person, not the government, is a good indicator that it is civil. Substantive civil law. Like criminal law, research questions about civil law can either be substantive or procedural. Substantive law is the law that establishes our rights and duties, either written down in statutes or case law. For example, when someone is involved in a car accident, damages property, and injures people, a set of principles called tort law determine who is liable to whom and for what. It might not appear in any statute anywhere. Tort law developed in case law over the many years, but it is still part of the law, and the driver can be held liable for damages. Most legal research involves substantive civil law to help you fit your problem into a correct category. We have provided a large list of categories with definitions for each. These are found in figuring out the area of law you're researching below. Another way to find common civil actions is to review your state's civil jury instructions. Many states post the jury instructions online. The instructions explain the law in simple terms that someone without legal training can understand. Judges use them at the end of a trial to explain the law that applies to the case. Then the judges instruct the jury to apply the facts heard at the trial to the law read from the jury instructions. Not only do jury instructions assist for all common causes of action, but you'll get a good idea of the type of civil actions available by reading through the table of contents. The actual jury instructions explain what must be proven at trial, called elements. And in many cases, each instruction contains citations to important statutes and cases. Another reason to pull the applicable jury instructions at the very onset of your case is that the instructions will give you a template to follow in conducting your research. The instructions will list each element that you'll need to prove in a way that's easy to understand. You then make sure that you have adequate evidence to prove each element. A plaintiff who can't prove each element with evidence will lose the case, which is why it is essential to understand the law that applies in your matter. We'll discuss how the court uses jury instructions at trial in further detail and how to find them online in Chapter 9. Civil procedure. Civil procedure is a set of rules that govern how our civil justice system works. It controls matters as which courts have authority to decide different kinds of lawsuits, what kind of documents must be filed, when they need to be filed, who can be sued, what kind of proof can be offered in court, and how to appeal to a higher court. For example, suppose you want to sue the local grocery store because you slipped and fell in the store. In that case, civil procedure will tell you where to file, where you can file your lawsuit. You won't be able to sue from Arkansas if your grocery store is located in Michigan, for example. The documents you must file to start the lawsuit, perhaps a simple complaint that explains why you're suing and what you're asking for. When you must file these documents within 2 years after the incident occurred. And how you must notify the grocer that you have filed a lawsuit is usually by having an unrelated third party hand over the paperwork. Each state has its own set of procedural rules. However, many states have procedures that are very similar to the federal civil rules of procedure used in all federal courts. We'll explain more how to find and use the rules that apply to you in Chapter 5. State law, federal law. When thinking about the area of law you need to research, consider whether the issue you're researching is a matter of state law, federal law, or both. It will help you narrow your research. For instance, it might help you identify whether you should look to a secondary source that deals explicitly with federal tax issues or online for your state's court's small claim procedure. It won't be immediately apparent in every case, but you can reference the state versus federal comparison chart on the U.S. Court's website or refer back to Chapter 1 for more help. If you can't figure it out, don't worry. As you start your research, this will probably become more clear. Step 2, figuring out the area of law you're researching. Once you determine whether the area of law you're researching is criminal, civil, or state or federal, you'll want to go a little bit more specific. That's because many of the secondary sources we discussed in Chapter 2 will be organized by subject area or might even be limited to specific areas of law. You want to learn the language for that area. For example, suppose you want to find out the legal requirement for incorporating in your state. In that case, you'll look at the sources under corporations and incorporating, but also search indexes for business entity, law, or formation. Common civil law categories. Okay, now this is where we break it down. The task of narrowing the area of law will be slightly easier for you if you're dealing with substantive criminal issues. You can look at the crime involved and start from there, but it is a little harder to classify substantive civil law issues. The list set out below contains some of the common substantive civil law categories used in many indexes. Knowing where your subject falls might help you narrow your search. Many legal issues fall into more than one category. The categories. Administrative law refers to the law regulating government agencies. Bankruptcy covers the process that allows debtors to liquidate assets and be relieved of further liability. It is governed primarily by federal law, but also in state property law. Business and professional law deal with restrictions and license requirements placed on professionals, for example, doctors and lawyers and other occupational groups. Business entity law relates to creating business entities such as corporations, limited liability companies, and partnerships. It can involve both state and federal laws on how these entities can operate and be taxed, the rights of shareholders, the rights and duties of entity officers, the directors, and more. Civil rights law means provisions that protects individuals from discrimination on the basis of illegally recognized characteristics, race, sex, ethics, or national background or color. Commercial law refers to federal and state regulations governing commercial relations between borrowers and lenders, banks and their customers, wholesalers and retailers, mortgagors and mortgagees. Generally, this area dispute between business people rather than business people and the consumer. Constitutional law covers issues applying to federal or state constitutions. Consumer law deals with the requirements governing transactions between a seller and a buyer of personal property in a commercial setting. For example, when an individual buys products like cars or furniture from a retailer. Contracts. In this area of law dealing with written and oral agreements and what they do if they are broken or canceled. Corporation law deal with how corporations are formed and required and how they operate. Creditor-debtor law covers how debts are collected and handled. For example, whether they can be canceled or reorganized in bankruptcy. Cyber law refers to how internet affects copyright, trademark, libel, pornography, contracts, privacy, and court jurisdictions. Education law covers the rights of students and the restrictions placed on them by schools. Elder law encompasses issues relevant to seniors such as Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, nursing homes, and special needs trusts. Employment law means the rights of employees and the restrictions placed on employers by law. Energy law, which includes federal and state and federal laws, govern the production, distribution, and utilization of energy sources like coal, natural gas, oil, electrical and nuclear power, and alternative energy. Environmental law deals with the regulation of use of the environment by business, governments, and individuals. For example, this includes issues of air and water pollution, the environmental impact of new construction projects, the preservation of endangered species, and similar matters. It is an area regulated by both federal and state governments. Estate planning is the process people use to arrange for distribution of their property after they die. It includes such subjects as living trusts, joint tenancies, wills, testamentaries, trusts, and gifts. Evidence covers the types of items and testimony that can be introduced as proof of in a trial or hearing. Family law, divorce law, domestic relation law all refer to matters relating to family and family divisions such as marriage, divorce, child support, and child custody. Health law relates to issues affecting health, like the type of quality of medical treatment received from hospitals or occupational health and safety requirements. Housing law covers programs involving government subsidies for construction and rental assistance, public housing, state and local planning requirements related to the type and amount of houses in different areas, and discriminatory housing practices. Insurance law encompasses problems arising under any kind of insurance contract, such as life insurance, car insurance, homeowners insurance, fire insurance, and disability insurance. Intellectual property laws, the law and procedures governing copyrights, trademarks, trade secrets, and patents. Juvenile law deals with juvenile delinquency. When a child commits an act as though it would be a crime if he or she were an adult. Or dependency, when a child is abused or neglected, becomes a ward of the state. Labor law broadly covers issues of surrounding unions. Landlord-tenant law is concerned with all issues arising out of landlord-tenant relationships, such as eviction, leases, rental agreements, rental control, and similar matters. Military law relates to all matters under the authority jurisdiction of the military, including discharges, enlistment, mandatory registration laws, and court martials and benefits. Municipal law includes zoning, ordinances, land use planning, condemnation of property, incorporation of cities, contracting for public improvement, and other materials of local concern. Prison law covers prison conditions, disciplinary procedures, parole, constitutional rights, and adequate access to legal information and medical treatment. Property law encompasses the purchase, maintenance, and regulation and sale of real estate. Public benefits law means the administration and distribution of federal and state benefits such as TAN, temporary assistance for needy families, Social Security disability, Social Security income, food stamps, school lunches, foster homes, Medicaid, Medicare, and state disability. Public utilities law covers duties, responsibilities, and rights of public utilities that provide water, telephone, sewage, and garbage disposal, and gas and electricity. Tax law includes all services related to federal and state taxation of such items as income, personal property, business profits, real estate, and sales transactions. Tort law. Personal injury law is tort law. Deals with an injury to a person or business that is directly caused by intentional or neglect actions of someone else. Many lawsuits involve torts. The most common is negligence. This involves behavior that is considered unreasonably careless under the circumstances that directly results in injury to another. Medical malpractice, legal malpractice, and most automobile accidents are examples of negligence. Unemployment insurance covers all matters related to unemployment insurance benefits. Workers' compensation concerns the rights of workers who are injured or killed in work related incidents. Understanding indexes and topical searches. Knowing which area of law you are searching is very important. Not only will you do so by helping narrow your legal questions, but you'll have a better idea where to start when you begin. So when you go to the law library without knowing any details on a particular topic, you will always need to look at an index first. Like the indexes you'll find in the back of books, indexes to legal texts are usually alphabetical list of subjects with references that'll tell you within the text where you can find information on those subjects. To find secondary sources, statutes, and even cases using special systems created for this purpose divided in chapter 6. You'll need to have some general idea of what key subjects to look for because no two indexes will be exactly alike. You might find one index that use one phrase while another one excludes it completely, but has a different phrase that covers the same or similar topic. The same is true if you conduct an online researches. The results you get from typing in word or phrases into a search category will vary depending on many factors like how common the words are, whether they have more or one meaning, whether they're a legal term. Understanding the area of law you're researching will help you conduct researches online or in books or printed material because it would be easier to formulate the types of words and phrases that might be relevant to your searches. You can use one or all the methods below to find words relevant to your legal topic. The stat the, the stat sky cartwheel approach. The stat sky approach uses a diagram called a cartwheel, which prompts the reader for different word categories. For example, suppose that research problem involves determining who is authorized to perform a wedding and the ceremony type that needs to be conducted. The structure of the cartwheel is shown. Okay, so the circle. I don't know if you can see that or not, but that's what that is. Cartwheel. Cartwheel. Reproduction, Permission by Domestic Relations by William P. Statsky, copyright 1978, West Publishing Company. Out of print, all rights reserved. I was born in 78. Back to the points. The first step in using the index in the table of contents in any law books is to look up the keyword. For example, keyword is wedding. In that index and table, if that's not successful, the next step is to think of as many different paraphrasings and contexts of the word wedding as possible. The cartwheel method has 18 steps to help you come up with the terms to look up in the index or table of contents as follows. 1. Identify all the major words from the fact of the research problem. Place each word or small set of words in the center of the cartwheel. In the index and table of contents, look up all these different words. Identify the broader category of all these major words. In the index and in the table of contents, look up all these words in the broader categories. Identify and narrow categories of these words. In the indexes and the table of contents, look up all of the narrower categories. Identify all the synonyms for the words. In the index and the table of contents, look up all of these synonyms. Identify all the antonyms of these words. In the index and the table of contents, look up all of these antonyms. Identify all the closely related words. In the index and table of contents, look up all the closely related words. 13. Identify all procedural terms to these words. 14. In the index and table of contents, look up all of these procedural terms. 15. Identify all agencies, if any, which might have some connection to these words. 16. In the index and table of contents, look up all these agencies. 17. Identify all long shots. 18. In the index and table of contents, look up all of these long shots. If these were to apply these 18 steps of the cartwheel to the word wedding, Here are some of the sorts of words and phrases that you would check in the index and table of contents of every law book that deals with family law. Broader words: celebration, ceremony, rite, ritual, formality, festivity. Narrower words: civil wedding, church wedding, proximity wedding, sham wedding, shotgun marriage. Synonyms: marriage, nuptials. Antonyms: alienations, annulment, dissolution, divorce, separation. Loosely related words: matrimony, marital, domestic, husband, wife, bride, anniversary, custom, children, blood test, premarital, spouse, relationship, family, home, consummation, cohabitation, sexual relation, brothel, minister, wedlock, oath, contract, name change, domicile, residence. Procedural terms: application, petition, authorization, agency, Bureau of Vital Statistics, county clerk, license, bureau, secretary of state, justice of the peace, long shot, dowry, common law, single, blood, relationship, fraud, religion, license, illegitimate, remarriage, antenuptial, alimony, bigamy, pregnancies, gift, chastity, communion, property, impotence, incest, virginity, support, custody, consent, paternity. Perhaps you might think that some of the word selections in the above category are a bit far-fetched, but you simply will not know for sure whether a word will be fruitful until you try it. To be successful, you must be imaginative. Understanding index jargon. Indexes themselves use jargon that can be confusing. Here are definitions of some of the more commonly used indexing terms. Generally, this index. When a term is followed by generally this index, that it means that it can be found as a main entry in its alphabetical place in the index. For instance, if you find child support under a larger heading of minors, it is filed by general this index. Look for it as the main entry. See also the terms following the see also may procedure related subject matter. Okay. See dot. The material seek may be found directly under the term following C rather than under the original term. C blank infra. The entry is found under the same name but further down alphabetically. It is Latin for below. C blank supra. The entry is found under the same main entry but further up alphabetically. Is Latin for above. So I just learned Latin. Supra is above and infra is below. An informal approach. If you don't want to follow the cartwheel method, there are other ways to approach legal indexing. The one that we most use has 6 steps. Select several steps. Step 1, select several key plain English terms to define the research problem and several alternatives to these terms. Step 2, use these words to select one or more probable legal categories. Step 3, search the indexes for a main entry relevant to your problem and be prepared to follow up with cross-references. Step 4, search for relevant sub-entries under the main entry. Step 5, bounce back to another main entry if your first choice doesn't work out. Once you find a good main entry and sub-entry, think even smaller and more detailed. For instance, suppose your research question is whether a drunk driving conviction results in the loss of a driver's license. The first step is to determine some of the key terms. You might want to start with drunk driving and such variations as operating a vehicle while under the influence of intoxicating beverages or driving while intoxicated. Same process will hold true for driver's license. Possible alternative terms for driver's license are operator's permit, operator's license. Second step is to determine whether these terms logically fit under one of the general civil or criminal law substantive categories. Vehicle law would be one of the most appropriate categories, so you would probably start with vehicles. The third step is to search the indexes and be prepared to follow up cross references. For instance, in this example, if you started with vehicles, you would probably refer to motor vehicles. The fourth step would be to search for sub-entries under the Proman main entry. For example, if you look for drunk driving under motor vehicles, you might find alternatives such as operating under the influence. Okay. So we got a whole list of road regulations, indexes. Indexes. The fifth step is to go back to another main entry if your first choice doesn't pan out. For example, if you found no reference to drunk driving or its equivalent under motor vehicles, consider looking under alcohol, traffic offenses, alcoholic beverages, automobiles. You might come up with some variations of your own with your specific terms. The sixth step is to conceptualize even more detailed entries that are likely to refer you to material on your specific question. For instance, once you find an entry that covers drunk driving under the main entry, motor vehicle, you might consider for looking for specific terms as license, suspensions, revocation, restrictions, or forfeiture. Sidebar. Using an informal approach to write research queries. Using an informational categorization method as explained above is useful even if you don't even see yourself looking through any legal indexes, because it can also help you use Boolean logic discussed in the previous chapter to write your relevant search queries. If you don't write a search that is narrow enough, you're risking getting too much information, much of it possibly irrelevant. On the other hand, if you exclude similar terms from your query, you risk losing out on possible relevant results. Use an example above about researching who is authorized to perform a wedding. You can write a Boolean search to include either words wedding or marriage by writing wedding or marriage. And if you want it to be located near the word ceremony or a synonym, you could write it like this: wedding or marriage near /3 celebration or ceremony, right? Ritual or formality or festive. Makes sense. In researching something like this, you might find yourself continually adjusting your search terms and trying to narrow on your specific topics, but it's much easier to do this if you have a list of relevant terms with which to start. As you can see, thinking of alternative words can open up your searches while giving you only relevant results. Back at it. If you run up against a brick wall, take a deep breath and start over. Restructure your question, come up with new terms, and find different substantive category. We can't emphasize strongly enough that most research fails because the research runs out of patience at the indexing stage. Above are 3 examples from indexing listing to demonstrate the different ways indexing can be organized. The one thing they all have in common is that they are all organized from different general terms to specific sub-entries. The samples show the different ways the index can treat the topic of license revocation for drunk driving. We'll show you how to find specific indexes you need later in the book. For now, just make sure that when you get there, you're ready to start researching based on some of the terms you're thinking of now. Online legal indexes. Looking online is often significantly simpler and quicker than using print indexes. While you might have to spend hours trying to find the relevant words in the print indexes, you might try to phrase after phrase with help from a search engine. You can just type in a phrase and see what it brings from a variety of sources instead of just one. If it doesn't work, it doesn't take long to find another phrase. And if you get relevant results that aren't detailed or reliable, you can awfully quickly look at them to get ideas for other words or phrases. However, if you've already found an online resources, your options might be limited. Menus. Typically, menu approaches are like nested tables of context. Click on the largest category and get a list of subcategories. Then click the subcategory for a third level of entries. This can go on for a number of levels, depending on the material, until you find and approach a specific link. Keywords. This is the method discussed above. It lets you search for material that contain the words that you enter in a search or query box. Keywords menus. This method presents you with a drop-down menu of keywords. Once you select a keyword, you'll be taken to the material that has been associated with the keyword by the publisher of that material. Although none of these tools work exactly like a print index, you should keep the same principle in mind when using them. If you don't find what you're looking for at first, keep trying. If your initial keywords don't produce anything helpful, change them. If your choice of terms in the drop-down menu doesn't work, select some new ones. Step 3. What resources will you need? What resources will help you find what you need? Once you have a sense of what you're looking for, you can start identifying the possible resources that will help you find it. In the following chapters, we'll discuss how to locate the right sources. For now, answer these questions. Are you looking for a general overview of the law on a specific subject? In that case, you might want to start with the secondary source. This might be a legal text or a court website, even an article online or summary. Anything that is not primary law counts. We'll explain on how to do background research and use secondary sources. Are you looking for a specific statute on a subject? If you know what you need to look at for a specific statute, administrative regulation, or local ordinance, for example, the definition of a crime someone has been charged with, go directly to the source, as we'll explain in Chapter 5. A single statute is usually the start to finding many other resources. If you're looking for a case that applies to the law to a situation similar to the one you're researching, case law uses factual scenarios to help explain how the law works in different situations. This is a good way to learn how courts interpret the laws. It makes particular sense if you're writing legal documents or research papers. Read Chapter 6 to learn how to find cases. We recognize this approach won't cover every situation. For example, if you're exploring an area of international law, you might be looking to other sources. International legal research is beyond the scope of this book. But for the vast majority of cases, answering these questions will get you started. As you explore, you might find quickly yourself needing to look for other resources. Just as these questions decide where to begin. Figure out your legal research question. The last step in the process of planning your legal research is framing your issue. You want to have a clear idea about why you are researching and what what you hope to accomplish. This might seem silly, but if you begin researching without taking this critical step, you'll soon find it very easy to become overwhelmed. It is rare that you won't find enough information on the subject to get you started. In most cases, there'll simply be too much there, and you won't even know where to begin without a centering question. It is easy to get sidetracked. Framing your legal question helps avoid this problem. Why are you conducting legal research? To frame your legal research question, think about why you're conducting research. This question is important because it will help you target the type of legal resources you need to look at and how deep you need to dig to get your answers. Are you going to be filing a lawsuit? If that's the case, you'll need to spend a good deal of time looking at legal requirements for doing so. We'll explain how in greater detail in Chapter 9. You'll also need to look at the law to figure out what law you believe is violated and what appropriate damages or relief should be granted. On the other hand, your research will take a very different kind of detail if you plan on meeting with a lawyer. And if you want to know what questions to ask to make use of the lawyer's time most efficiently, in that case, you'll probably want to start with general lay of the land and focus on the key areas if they seem relevant. For example, if you're going to see an estate planning attorney about drafting a will, you might learn about a little bit about the concepts of wills generally. But your research might lead you to areas of special interest. For example, placing your assets into a living trust. While you might learn about wills and estate planning, you might focus your research on living trusts. You probably won't read your statutes on living trusts. However, because your lawyer already will be familiar with those laws and will be probably the person who will draw up the necessary documents, instead you're looking for information that would tell you what to ask to help you figure out if it is the right planning tool for you. We recommend writing down what your goal is. For example, a case like the first one, you might write down, my goal is to file a lawsuit against the furniture store that has damaged my hardwood floor when they delivered my dresser, then refused to pay for my repairs. Or in the second case, you might write, my goal is to find out what estate planning strategies are available to me that will avoid probate and minimize hassles and expenses for my family. What questions do you need answered? With the target goal in mind, you can start to create a list of questions you need answered to help you reach your goal. As we explained, your legal issue might contain both legal and procedural components, so you might have questions related to both fields. Here are some sample questions based on the examples above. My goal is to file a lawsuit against the furniture store that damaged my hardwood floors when they delivered the dresser and then refused to pay for my repairs. What law did the furniture store break by damaging the floor? Where do I file a lawsuit against the furniture store? When do I have to file my lawsuit? What kind of paperwork do I need to file my lawsuit? As you can see, these are very basic questions. They might lead to new questions too. For example, once you figure out the law that the furniture store broke and damaged in the floor, they most acted negligently. You might have to research how to calculate or prove the amount of damage caused by the mishap. Or if you determine that you must file a lawsuit in the Superior Court, you might find out whether the court has any standard forms to help you do this. My goal is to create a list of questions so I can discuss with my attorney the estate planning strategies available to me to avoid probate and minimize hassles for my family. What is a living trust? Do I need a living trust? If I have a will, what options other than a living trust avoid probate and help minimize hassles and expenses? In the second case, you will not even have to find an answer to most of these questions, and these will serve as the basis for discussions you'll have with your attorney. Your list of questions is an important starting point from conducting your legal research. Keeping you focused on your task. In the next chapter, we'll talk about how you can find some background material to get started. And that was identifying your legal issue. Till next time.
With the Macedonia Police Department and the Ohio Department of Education regarding the situation. Some parents hope the case will cause the district